I rescued a pregnant woman from a trap, never expecting her to be my husband's first love. Lu Yunzhu, Kyoto's most talented woman, was like a cloud in the sky and a pearl in the sea. And I, a mere peasant woman, was no more than wheat in the fields. Thus, Xiao Hisai naturally expected me to give up having children. I hope you'll join me in raising Yunzhu's child to adulthood. She is sure to be an intelligent and beautiful girl. But I refuse to be wronged. While my husband was lavishing care on Lu Yunzhu, I was examining the imperial proclamation closely. Ancient Story Time, Ancient History Channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe. The guards at the yamen looked me up and down. This is the Empress Dowager's most treasured nut carving. Can you truly reproduce it, my lady? The nut carving depicted on the imperial proclamation was exquisitely crafted and lifelike. It was a three-decked seagoing vessel, but unfortunately, its stern had been burned, leaving nearly half the hull charred black. There aren't many people in linen capable of doing such delicate handiwork. As it happens, I'm one of them. I nodded. I said I could. The constable then looked at the married woman's coiffure atop my head. A woman, once married, belongs to her husband and needs her husband's family's consent. He hesitated. This journey requires traveling far to the capital. Can you manage it, my lady? If I were to accept the imperial proclamation, it would be a long journey over high mountains and distant roads. I looked back at the place not far away. My husband is choosing a gold lock for the child in Miss Lu's belly. The peddler was smooth-tongued. Just look at how pointed Madame's belly is, surely it must be a little young master. You're a lucky man, sir. Miss Lu smiled shyly, and Xiao Hisai's ears turned red. Everyone is enjoying themselves, and they won't miss me. So I stepped forward, tore down the imperial proclamation, and handed it to the bailiff. A lone widow, with no family to hold me back, I can leave immediately. The bailiff was an impatient man, and upon hearing me say that, he immediately prepared to head back. He went to rent a carriage and asked me to wait by the notice board for a while. I had acted on impulse. Only after the yamen runners left did I begin to come to my senses. This street was broad and bustling with people, and it was common for companions to lose one another in the crowd. I wondered whether Xiao Hisai would panic and come looking for me if he discovered that I was gone. Perhaps after buying Miss Lu a gold lock, he would also think to add a simple hairpin for me. But I waited and waited. After Miss Lu bought the gold lock, she went to buy brown sugar, and with the sweetness still in her mouth, she wanted to have new clothes made. I watched Xiao Hisai protect Miss Lu's belly as he carefully accompanied her into the Lu family tailor shop. I lowered my eyes to look at my sleeves, mended again and again, and the hem of my skirt, its threads frayed and coming loose. They never realized I was gone. My lady, let's go. The bailiff has already hired a carriage and horses. Then let's go. Following the riverbank, we walked along the official road, which was shrouded in mist after the recent rain. The yamen runner stopped and asked for a bowl of wine. Luckily, we happened upon you, madam, when you posted the notice. My wife is about to give birth, and I'm hurrying home. Perhaps because the errand was half accomplished, the yamen runner looked delighted and chatted with me for a few more moments. This pregnancy has been hard on my wife. At first, she couldn't eat anything at all, and I even wished we could do without the child, but my wife couldn't bear to give it up. The swarthy man could not hide the smile on his face as he spoke of his wife and unborn child. You're going to be a good father, sir. At those words, the yamen runner waved his hand. I've never been fond of children, they make such a racket that my head hurts. But my wife is beautiful, so if it's a little girl who looks like her, she'll surely be very pretty. If not, and it's a boy. The mist rising from the river carried the bailiff's voice into the distance. The bailiff spoke of his wife at home, his eyes crinkling with a smile. It suddenly dawned on me. Why, even though the child in Miss Lu's belly clearly wasn't Xiao Hisai's, did I still feel a thorn in my side? because he projected his feelings for Miss Lu onto that child. He hoped the child would be clever and beautiful like Lu Yunju and looked forward to raising a little Lu Yunju. When Lu Yunju first arrived, I made a fuss and harbored resentment. Xiao He resignedly said that I was being unreasonable. Yunju's child is not my own, and she is a pitiful widow with a child. Why, exactly, can you not tolerate her? He and Miss Lu have no improper relationship. They are entirely innocent. As if everything were my fault. As if I were so jealous that I had no compassion at all. Back then, I couldn't win the argument with him, but now I've figured it out. The yamen runner poured himself another bowl of wine. Madam, your husband's family is gone, won't your own family take you in either? I did have a family of my own. A month ago, I found a beautiful woman on the mountain behind our village. She wore no makeup, her belly slightly rounded. She had accidentally stepped into a hunter's trap and collapsed amid a clump of wild grass. I hurried over to rescue her, carried her home, and gave her water and medicine. As dusk approached, my husband, Xiao Hisai, returned from his post. He was a clerk at the county yamen, and on his way home, he always liked to bring me some freshly baked sweet cakes. Today I asked the peddler to add an extra layer of sugar, my lady. Xiao Hisai pushed open the door and approached. Before I could tell him that I had saved a young woman today, the sugar cake fell to the ground with a clatter. My husband took a step forward in astonishment. Yunju? At that very moment, the woman I had been busy caring for all day, who had shown no sign of waking, slowly opened her eyes. She neither looked at me nor asked about the child in her belly. She only gazed at her husband and shed tears. Only then did I realize that the visitor was Xiao Hisai's first love, Lu Yunju. Many years ago, my husband passed the imperial examination and became acquainted with Lu Yunju, a female physician who was at the height of her fame at the time. The story unfolded like a play. Xiao Hisai admired Miss Lu, but Lu Yunju was free-spirited by nature and unwilling to remain confined to the inner quarters. She wanted to travel throughout the land. Yet my husband still had a seriously ill mother at home waiting for him to return from the examination. In the end, Lu Yunju chose to leave. This became Xiao Hisai's lifelong regret. When their love was at its deepest, he made her a promise: if there ever came a day when Lu Yunju was unhappy, she should come to him. Even if she had married another man, he would still treat Lu Yunju's child as his own. Xiao Lang, does the jest you made back then still stand? I was still stunned, holding the towel I had used to wipe her sweat. Then I heard my husband solemnly agree. Of course. A gentleman's promise is worth 1,000 pieces of gold. He instructed me to clear out the largest guest room. It faced the sun and would be good for a pregnant woman. He also ordered the flowers and plants in my courtyard to be uprooted, because their scent made Lu Yunju suffer from morning sickness. I really want to ask, if my husband treats this child as his own, then what relationship would this child and I have? The child calls Xiao Hisai father, so am I the mother, or is it Lu Yunju? At that moment, Xiao Hisai sighed. The child in Yunju's womb is not mine, but I gave my word that I would treat the child as my own. Since she is my child, she is also your child. Yunju is our younger sister. Yet Lu Yunju never called me sister-in-law. She called me Miss Chen or Miss Xiaomai. My name is Chinmai because I was born during the wheat harvest. Miss Lu is a cloud in the sky and a pearl in the sea, while I am merely a stalk of wheat. Whenever she calls me that, I cannot help but complain inwardly, why was it that when I was born, father saw neither the moon nor the rosy dawn, but instead a field of wheat? With my worries mounting, I could not help but seek my mother's advice. Mother first glared at me, looking as though she had known this would happen all along. Someone like Lord Xiao, I'm lucky I burned enough incense to be able to stay by your side for 6 years. She swiftly slaughtered the old hen she had raised for years in the house, eagerly preparing to make postpartum nourishment for Lu Yunju. If you haven't managed to have a child in 6 years, and you still can't take proper care of Miss Lu, Lord Xiao will divorce you one of these days, and then you'll have plenty to cry about. She was always like this. At first, when they learned I was to marry Xiao Hixi, they felt I was marrying far above my station. After we actually married, they urged me every day to take medicine and try folk remedies, determined to make sure I bore the Xiao family a son. Even though Xiao Hixi himself did not care. Now that they know Lu Yunshu is here to rest and protect her pregnancy, they are eager to rush over and attend to her. I understood. She was afraid that Xiao Hixi would abandon me. Yet I felt even more uncomfortable, as though a wad of old cotton were stuffed in my chest, clogging my throat. I was clearly the daughter she had carried for 10 months, yet even Uncle Chen, the oil seller next door, would ask, "Look at your mother-in-law." She won't say it outright, but she still wants a grandson. It seemed that she had raised me all these years solely to welcome Xiao Heqi as her esteemed son-in-law, and that I ought to give everything to the Xiao family. But it was Xiao Heqi who didn't want children. When we had just married, he said I was still young, and that his mother was ill and needed someone to care for her closely. He was afraid I would be unable to cope and damage my health. Later, when his mother passed away, he said the children were too noisy and would disturb his studies, asking me to wait a little longer. Until 2 months before Lu Yunju appeared. We were out shopping when a little girl ran straight into Xiao Hixai's legs and burst into tears. I had never seen my husband so patient and gentle, soothing the little girl tirelessly and carrying her to find her parents. After we returned home, Xiao Hixai wrapped his arms around my waist from behind. He said, "Xiao Mai, let's have a child." A little girl, gentle and adorable. I was overjoyed. The little cloth bundle for when the baby is born, the tiny outfit for the full moon celebration, the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone for the 1-year-old Shuazhou ceremony. Though the child isn't even on the way yet, I've already gone over everything we'll need again and again. Xiao Hixi laughed at me. Why prepare so early? We don't even know whether it'll be a boy or a girl. What about you? Would you prefer a boy or a girl? Xiao Hixi pondered for a while, then held me close and said, "A daughter." And so I waited in joyful anticipation until Lu Yunju arrived. On the second night after Lu Yunju settled in, I brought her medicine to protect the pregnancy and prepared some calming incense. When I noticed that I was sweating, I heated water for a bath and applied the scented balm I had newly bought at the market. Blushing, I embraced Xiao Hixi and stammered as I raised my head to kiss the corner of his lips. But he pushed me away. He sighed, looking at me with some guilt in his eyes, yet his resolve was firm. "Xiao Mai, I don't want any other children. If we had a child of our own, we might inevitably favor one over the other, and that wouldn't be fair to Yunju's child. Xiao Mai, I'm sorry you've had to suffer." But I was unwilling to suffer in silence. And so, the carriage trampled through the cold morning dew and frost, clip-clopping all the way as it carried me to the capital. The capital was bustling. It was only after I arrived that I learned nearly 100 craftsmen from all over the country had come to answer the emperor's summons. There were renowned master carpenters, as well as artisans skilled in carving gold and engraving silver. I was the only woman. The artisans had to register their names and change clothes before entering the palace to pay their respects to the Empress Dowager. The registration line was very long. The elderly carpenter in front of me glanced sideways at me. Which little girl, barely out of diapers, dares to answer the Emperor's call? I politely glanced at the old carpenter's bald head. Your hair probably did grow in fully once, but now it's almost all fallen out. You. The old carpenter glared and moved to shove me, but an arm swept across to block him. The newcomer's voice rang out clearly. "Sir, are you looking to cause trouble?" The yamen runners around us all bowed and saluted, addressing him as Lord Zhou, the vice director from the Ministry of Rights overseeing this matter. The old carpenter lowered his hand and continued to grumble indignantly. "I have devoted 40 years to mastering the carpentry trade, and now I'm being compared to a woman. What an insult, an utter insult." Although no one around him openly spoke up, a few people cast unfriendly looks and could not help quietly echoing him. I clenched my fist. A craftsperson's trade is passed down from one's ancestors, and in most cases, it is passed from father to son, not to daughters. Some families, when furnishing their homes, even refuse to use objects made by women, deeming them too laden with energy and fearing that they will ruin the master of the household's future prospects. If this vice director was also prejudiced in this way, I would likely have to return from this trip empty-handed. 10 days had passed since I left home. Xiao Hisai and that Miss Liu had probably already begun living in marital harmony, and I had no way back. Thinking of this, I gritted my teeth and boldly spoke. My lord, although the old carpenter has practiced his craft for many years, wood carving and nut carving are ultimately different. Why not let this commoner and the carpenter compete on the spot? If I lose, I will willingly withdraw. Lord Zhou was also taken aback when he heard this and turned around to look me over. You truly dare to compete? I nodded firmly. I feared the deputy minister might refuse, so I deliberately provoked him. Could it be that the old carpenter has no real skill and dares not compete with me? Sure enough, riled up by my provocation, the old man immediately set down the bundle on his back and glared at me, bristling with indignation. Then let's compete. Perhaps he found it amusing, so Magistrate Zhou agreed, even allowing any dissatisfied craftsman to come forward and compete as well. The bailiffs presented a string of almond shells, washed and drained. There were no restrictions on the designs, and the allotted time was 2 hours. The authorities would provide basic tables and knives. The carpenter sat down boldly, laid out an entire chest of tools, with knives of every size from large to small, then glanced sidelong at me. Little girl, don't tell me you don't even have a knife kit. I pressed my lips together. I had left in such a hurry that I really hadn't. However, peach pits are small, the allotted time wasn't very long, and there was no need for anything too fancy. The flat knife, half-round knife, and corner knife provided by the authorities were enough. The sun gradually climbed toward the feet of the clouds. The old carpenter beside me had already carved 8 arhats with fluid ease, earning a chorus of praise. As expected of an old hand, his craftsmanship is truly deft. The few middle-aged artisans in front of me were also hard at work, some carving pavilions and towers, others carving auspicious dragons and phoenixes. Groups of peach pits were laid out in rows, each bearing an excellent meaning. When they turned to look at me, I was still doggedly working on the first peach pit. This young lady doesn't seem very skilled. She's still carving her first peach pit. I simply pretended not to hear them. My father was once a craftsman, but my mother had only me, a daughter, and there was no one to pass his skills on to. In his spare time, he often carved little trinkets for me to play with. I was curious and followed his example, but my mother slapped my hands and said that this was not something a girl should do. Our family was poor, yet there was a peach tree behind the courtyard. Once it bore a heavy crop of fruit, we would have a large pile of peach pits to carve. My mother had always wished for more children and hoped to have a son. To make her happy, I secretly learned to carve scenes of children at play, planning to give it to her on her birthday as a good luck omen. Yet in the end, she flung the peach pit into the river. You insolent girl, how dare you mock me? No matter how useless I may be, I still gave birth to you. Who knows, you might turn out to be a hen that lays no eggs, unable to bear even one child. She was furious. Little did she know that her words would come true. 6 years into the marriage, I really still don't have a child of my own. Clang, the bailiff struck the gong. The appointed time had arrived. The old carpenter proudly arranged the 18 arhats. Each had a different expression, and they were vividly lifelike. He was a carpenter by trade, so his carving was not particularly delicate, but he certainly worked quickly. Our dynasty reveres Buddhism, and Her Majesty the Empress Dowager even had several Buddhist halls built. These 18 arhats could hardly be more appropriate. However, when did Lord Zhou ever say that we were going to compete over who could carve faster or who could carve more? He paced over to me and picked up the tiny peach pit. I had carved it with exquisite delicacy, and the peach pit was the smallest one as well. Those behind him craned their necks but still couldn't see clearly, unable to resist sneering. What is this supposed to be? It's so small, who can make it out? I clenched my fist and carefully studied Lord Zhou's expression. He seemed somewhat surprised and intrigued, then broke into a knowing smile. He asked me, "What are you carving?" I replied, "A children at play scene." On a tiny peach pit, 3 babies are carved, entwined and playing with one another. The chubby little children look as though they were taken from a New Year woodblock print. Upon closer inspection, there are 2 baby girls and 1 baby boy. The carpenter burst into loud laughter at the sound of this. Some country bumpkin of a woman, carving something so lacking in taste. But what Lord Zhou said next left him utterly stunned. Lord Zhou said, "In this contest, Miss Chinmai is the winner." I won my bet. On the way to the palace with Lord Zhou, my heart pounded like thunder, and I was terribly nervous. The palace pathways were intricate, and I dared not raise my head to look around until I was led into a small courtyard. "This is where the palace craftsmen live. Rest here for now. After you've bathed and changed, wait until Her Majesty the Empress Dowager summons you." "Miss Chin, you're a smart woman." I pressed my lips together. "Could you tell me why you wanted to carve a scene of children at play?" Peach pits are tiny, so most artisans would combine several of them to carve grand, novel designs with auspicious meanings. The 18 arhats, longevity peaches, landscapes, these are all things ordinary people might think of. Carving children like this is both laborious and unrewarding. Surely you don't intend to wish Her Majesty the Dowager Empress many children and much happiness, do you? Naturally, it wasn't chosen at random, aside from the fact that I was skilled at carving such small sculptures. I admitted frankly. Because of the ship on the imperial notice. The Empress Dowager had posted a notice throughout the realm seeking artisans, not to build new pavilions or towers, nor to carve gold and silver jewelry, but to restore a nut carving from the past. On the journey to the capital, I scrutinized the ship depicted on the imperial examination placard over and over again. In the charred black section at the stern, one could vaguely make out the figure and skirt hem of a woman. The Empress Dowager was no ordinary sheltered young lady in her day. She had accompanied Emperor Yuan in conquering the realm and had even commanded the Jiangnan Navy. On that ship carved from a walnut, there were people holding bows and arrows, as well as shields standing tall. The ship sat deep in the water, so it must have been carrying weapons and troops, making it sturdy and heavy. I suspect that the boat carved into the nut must be a warship. This also brings to mind a legend from many years ago, which says that the Empress Dowager once lost her eldest daughter in battle for the sake of Emperor Yuan's great cause. Why restore this particular nut carving? The imperial family was the richest in the world, what rare treasures and jewels could they not find? What exactly made the nut carving so precious? At the moment I boldly declared that I would compete, a daring guess suddenly occurred to me. Because this ship not only bears a carving of the Empress Dowager, but also one of the child she lost all those years ago, the baby girl. Lord Zhou was intrigued. "You truly are an intelligent woman." Then the carving of 3 babies playing was not a coincidence either? I nod. The current emperor is the Empress Dowager's biological son, and Princess Chaoyang is the emperor's younger sister by the same mother. Including the baby girl who died back then, the Empress Dowager has exactly 3 biological children, 2 daughters and 1 son. Perhaps despite wielding power over all under heaven, as a mother, she still remembers how each of her children looked when they were first born, hoping to raise them well into adulthood. Lord Zhou suddenly sighed. "I heard your husband died young. He was an unfortunate man. You seem to have such a profound understanding of filial devotion. Do you have any children?" I shook my head. "Then you must have a mother who loves you dearly?" I shook my head again helplessly. Lord Zhou, though Chinmai may be lacking in fortune, the bond between mother and daughter is natural and not difficult to surmise. In this contest, I merely took a shortcut. "I hope you will forgive me, Lord Zhou. If we had truly competed in carving, I might not have been a match for that old carpenter." Unfortunately, he thought too highly of himself and relied on his seniority and experience, carelessly underestimating his opponent. That was why he lost to me. Lord Zhou, however, did not mind and threw back his head in hearty laughter. The girl is as attentive as a hare and exceptionally clever. Your good fortune is yet to come. As spring passed and autumn arrived, I immersed myself in the work of restoring nut carvings, rising at dawn and returning at sunset. The Empress Dowager was kind and tolerant, and the craftsmen in the small courtyard had light workloads and were all very amiable. For many years, I often lamented that I was not a man, causing my mother sorrow and distress. I also felt inferior because of my humble background and lack of education in poetry and the classics. I could not even understand my husband's daily lessons. Yet during my days in the palace, I suddenly realized that, once I had left Xiao Hixi and my mother behind, life outside was not bitter at all. Instead, with each passing day, it gave me more to look forward to. The senior female official in charge of the palace workshops was nearly 60 and well-versed in the classics. She had served in the harem for over 20 years and was a court literary talent praised even by the emperor, yet she complimented me on how exquisite and beautiful my nut carvings were. Miss Chin, your hands are remarkably deft and your work exquisitely detailed. Such talent is rare throughout the land. I hurriedly waved my hands, saying that Lord Shangshu was a learned man. How could he be compared with a rough fellow like me? In the past, Xiao He resigned himself to his arrogance and offended a high-ranking official in the capital. Though he had passed the imperial examination and become a presented scholar, he was sent back to the office to work as a copyist. He looked down on his colleagues and neighbors. I was skilled at everything from growing wheat and sewing clothes to carving, yet I alone could not handle Xiao He's tiny writing brush properly. But the female official did not agree with me. Whether it's calligraphy or nut carving, they're both skills. How can one be considered superior to the other? If you carve something beautiful, you might even have a chance to become an official. At the time, I took her words merely as an attempt to comfort me. Carve a tiny peach pit and become an official? How could that be? Thus, when the Empress Dowager's decree came crashing down on me, I felt dizzy and dazed, as though I were walking on cotton. The nut carving was finally completed. Day and night, I carved the scorched section of the warship, along with the young woman aboard it and the infant in her arms. The infant clutched a tiny character 4 blessings in its hand. To carve that delicate character, I labored for more than 10 days and ruined hundreds of peach pits. Even the craftsmen around me urged me to give up. Fortunately, I ultimately managed to perfect it. I heard that Her Majesty the Empress Dowager was so enamored of it that she placed the tiny nut carving in the Buddhist hall built for the prematurely deceased Princess Yang, praying that her eldest daughter would be reborn as a human and live a peaceful, worry-free life. I carried out my duties well, and the Empress Dowager personally appointed me Deputy Directress of the Directorate of Palace Works, placing me in charge of the interior decoration of the palace and imperial residences. In just half a year, I had transformed into a court lady official, rising 3 ranks higher than Xiao Hixi I had once been. As it happened, the Xishan Imperial Villa was undergoing renovations, so I accepted the imperial decree and went there to oversee the work. I never expected to encounter Xiao Hixi at Xishan. The first familiar face Xishan encountered was the Yamen runner who had brought me to the capital last year. The Yamen runner's surname was Zhao. He had lost some weight, and when he saw me, his eyes widened. Good heavens, we've finally found you. Only then did I learn that shortly after I had claimed to be a widow and accompanied the Yamen runner to the capital, Xiao He resigned had come knocking on his door. Elder brother Zhao vented his grievances. That fellow Xiao insisted I had abducted his wife, but you clearly said back then that you were a widow. I saw a pregnant woman in his room calling him her husband, with an old mother managing the household. Clearly, they're a complete family, so why would he come claiming kinship with you? I went with him to the magistrate's office to make a scene. I never expected that you really were husband and wife. The man surnamed Xiao refused to let it go and insisted on following me to the capital to look for you, but you had already entered the palace. Where could he possibly find you? What on earth is going on? Brother Zhao was ordered to guard Xishan, so Xiao Hixi followed him there. He was well-read and had fine handwriting, and even managed to find a job copying Buddhist scriptures, transcribing texts for the Buddhist hall at the Shishan villa. Every few days, he would go to Brother Zhao to inquire about news of me. I never imagined that my offhand remark back then would cause the constable's elder brother so much trouble. I repeatedly apologized and offered him my monthly allowance as compensation. "You're a young woman trying to make your way in the world. How could I possibly take your money? That Xiao fellow has a wife and family, yet he neglects the wife he properly married. He certainly doesn't look like a decent man. I only worry that I was too hasty back then, eager to carry out my duty, and may have delayed you." I put an end to his worries with a smile. "It is all thanks to Brother Zhao that I am who I am today. How could I say you've delayed me? You are my benefactor, Brother Zhao. If I hadn't acted on impulse that day and left for the capital, I fear I would still be looking after my estranged husband and sitting the month for another woman's baby." The two maids behind me also bowed to him in unison, explaining that I was now the deputy lady-in-waiting overseeing the Shishan villa. Only then did Brother Zhao dare believe that the person he had hurriedly taken away after seeing her name on the list had truly made something of herself. I repeatedly urged him to accept it, saying it was a 1-month birthday gift for the child. Only then did Brother Zhao accept the smallest piece of silver, saying he would bring me some peach blossom wine brewed by his wife another day. Amid the struggle, I suddenly heard an urgent cry behind me. "Xiao Mai!" We hadn't seen each other in half a year, yet it felt like a lifetime had passed. Seeing Xiao Hisai running toward me with delight, I instinctively took a step back. He looked darker and somewhat haggard, probably from the hardship of caring for her during her confinement. When he saw me, his voice trembled slightly. "Xiao Mai, I've finally found you. Let's go home." I noticed the brand-new sachet hanging from his waist, probably made by Miss Liu. A red thread was tied around my wrist, likely tied by Miss Liu as well. Xiao Hisai noticed my gaze and instinctively drew his hand back. "Don't misunderstand. Yunshu had a difficult pregnancy and was afraid she wouldn't be able to endure it. The Taoists said that tying a thread around her wrist would give her a worldly attachment, making it less likely for her spirit to scatter." I nodded in understanding. I had thought seeing Xiao Hisai again would be unbearably painful, and for months I had been afraid to think about it. Yet when I truly saw him in that instant, I felt a jumble of emotions, bitterness, a daze, everything except that dull ache. Xiao Hisai looked at me carefully and reached for my hand. "Xiao Mai, I couldn't find you and was frantic with worry. Why did you leave without saying a word?" I took another step back and asked him only one question. "How is Miss Liu?" Xiao Hisai was delighted that I had spoken to him. "Both mother and daughter are safe and well. The child is named Mingyu, and she's lively and adorable. I know that before, because I was worried about Yunshu, I neglected you and hurt you. Now that they're both stable, I'll make it up to you properly, and the 4 of us will live happily together as a family." I asked him again, "Who does our family consist of?" Xiao Hisai counted excitedly, saying that there were him and me, mother Yunshu, and the little girl Mingyu. As he counted, his voice grew softer and softer under my calm, expressionless gaze. "Xiao Mai, please don't be angry. Yunshu and I are in the past. She is now my younger sister, and I have absolutely no other intentions." He carefully took a cloth bundle from his arms and handed it to me. "That day at the market, when I bought Mingyu a longevity lock, I thought of how our family was struggling when you married me, so I didn't give you any jewelry. I must make it up to you. Look." In the cloth bundle was a silver hairpin, finely crafted, the very one I had once longed for. But now, I touched the ends of my hair. The golden hairpin bestowed by the Empress Dowager, which held my hair in place, must have been dazzling in the sunlight. Otherwise, why would Xiao Hisai's expression have changed? He asked, "Xiao Mai, who have you been with these past few days?" I did not answer. He visibly panicked and looked me up and down. He noticed that I was not only wearing a gold hairpin but also a new bracelet on my wrist and that my clothes were in the most fashionable style in the capital. The two maids were clearly from an affluent household and were glaring at him menacingly. Xiao Hisai's voice finally showed a trace of a crack. "Xiao Mai, what on earth happened to you?" The place was bustling when a few scholars' teasing voices rang out. "Brother Xiao, sister Yu is still young, and you're already pining for a beautiful maiden?" Several young gentlemen came smiling to find him. They must have been his colleagues at the Shishan estate. The one at the head gave a flippant bow. "We are all scholars from the Shishan Buddhist Hall, specially come from various places to prepare the architectural plans for the construction of the Shishan estate." Then I knew. Artisans make things, and for an important undertaking like Shishan Villa, besides the officials and female attendants assigned by imperial decree, scholars from all over the country would also travel to the capital to submit their own designs. If they were fortunate enough to catch an official's eye, or even have their designs noticed by a noble, they might have the chance to earn merit, join the official's staff, and receive an official post, however minor. They were acquainted with Xiao Hisai, but did not know me, and assumed I was some young woman Xiao Hisai had flirted with while out and about. "We were entrusted by Miss Liu. If you go flirting with other women while you're out, you'll have to go home and listen to her scolding you, haha." Xiao Hisai panicked and hurriedly pushed the others away. "Stop talking nonsense. This is my wife." The scholars exchanged puzzled glances. They had known Xiao Hisai and his family for several months and had only seen a beautiful, gentle woman and a newborn baby girl in his household. The woman claimed to be the baby's mother, while Xiao Hisai claimed to be her father. How had another woman suddenly appeared, claiming to be Brother Zhao's wife? The scholar who appeared to be their leader hesitantly clasped his hands. "We did not know that Miss Yunshu was Brother Zhao's concubine." Xiao Hisai's face darkened. "Yunshu is not my concubine." This left the scholars even more confused. They stammered, looking at me, then at Xiao Hisai, then back at me. Watching them like a flock of winded quails, I found it inexplicably amusing. With that thought in mind, I actually laughed aloud. "Xiao Hisai, it's one thing for you to deceive yourself, but do you really expect everyone else to play blind along with you?" The scholar, wishing to apologize, still wanted to say a few conciliatory words to smooth things over. "Sister-in-law, please don't be angry. After all, it was merely a matter of having taken a wife and kept a mistress, the trivial affairs of wives and concubines in the household. A few soothing words should have been enough." Xiao Hisai, and perhaps the scholar trying to smooth things over, probably thought so too. The vast majority of men under heaven probably think this way. But Xiao Hisai was just as he had always been, while I was no longer a lowly stalk of wheat in the countryside. I waved my hand to interrupt him, then slowly stepped forward a few paces onto the stairs. The pearls and jade ornaments by my ears tinkled, and the two maids straightened their chests. I heard my own voice ring out clearly. "I am Chen Mai, Deputy Female Commissioner in charge of the Western Mountain Retreat." "Gentlemen, you should address me as Commissioner Chen. Although I am only the deputy envoy, I am a palace servant personally appointed by Her Majesty the Empress Dowager to be sent to the Western Hills Villa, and everyone throughout Western Hills treats me with the utmost respect." Xiao Hisai followed behind me in a daze, being jostled back and forth by the many officials of the Western Hills who had come to pay their respects, until he was farther and farther away from me. By the time he came to his senses, I was already more than 30 yards away from him. "Lord Qin." Someone up ahead called out to me in a clear voice, his figure straight as green bamboo. It was an acquaintance, the man who had escorted me into the palace that day, Lord Zhou Qin. He had since been promoted to director of the Ministry of Rites, and was supervising production at the Shishan Villa with me. "Indeed, I was not mistaken about you." I smiled with my lips pressed together. Zhou Qin, elder brother Zhao, and the palace attendant were all benefactors destined to cross my path. Though we met by chance, they never looked down on me for being a woman and were willing to give me equal opportunities, allowing me to establish a place for myself and make a living. The Shishan project was vast, and I buried myself in it. Xiao Hixi had no further opportunity to see me until Zhou Qin invited me out for drinks. At the tavern, Zhou Qin looked at me with a beaming smile. The construction work has been so hectic that I haven't yet had the chance to properly buy you a drink. I wouldn't dare call myself that. Lord Zhou, you are my benefactor. I should be the one treating you. After 3 rounds of drinks, Zhou Qin set down his wine cup, pondered for a long while, and finally spoke. Miss Qin is an intelligent woman, so I shall speak plainly. Zhou is the only son in his family. I entered government service 8 years ago and own 2 residences in the capital. Both my parents are gentle and courteous people, but I lost my wife in the early years. I currently have no wife, concubine, or mistress in my household, only a daughter, who has just turned 4. You are intelligent and well-mannered, miss, and I admire you. I heard that both your parents passed away early, and I do not know whether you have any close relatives in your distant hometown. Thus, I take the liberty of asking, would you be willing to become my wife? In the faint mist rising from the warmed wine, I met Zhou Qin's eyes. With a simple, respectable family background, an upright record in office, and an honorable character, he needed a clear-headed wife at his residence who could manage the household. By every measure, he was an exceedingly desirable husband. He did not know that I had lied. Believing me suitable, he candidly told me about his family's circumstances. As we chatted and laughed, Zhou Qin handed me a delicate little box containing a pair of jadeite earrings with an exquisite translucence. They'll suit you perfectly. But before I had a chance to speak, the box was suddenly pushed away by a pair of astonished hands. Xiao Mai, who is he to you? Xiao Hixi looked at me in panic, his hand gripping my shoulder tightly. His usual composure and calm were nowhere to be seen. He was afraid I might say something, yet desperately wanted me to explain. I had never seen him so flustered before. Oh no, I had. When I brought Miss Lu home after rescuing her. Reluctantly, I asked Lord Zhou to step aside and handed the box on the table back to him. It's too precious. You'd better keep it for Hui Jie. Zhou Hui was Lord Zhou's only daughter. The moment Lord Zhou left, Xiao Hixi could no longer suppress the doubts, suspicions, and conjectures that had plagued him these past days. Qin Mai, what exactly is your relationship with him? And who is Sister Hui? Where on earth have you been these past 6 months? Do you even remember that you're my wife? I am his wife. But over the past 6 months, who would have considered me his wife? Before the capital. He had always carried his white moonlight in his heart and refused to have children with me. He even made me care for Lu Yunzhu during childbirth, leaving me to endure the gossip of our neighbors. After the capital. He went everywhere with Lu Yunzhu, tied the red thread of fate with her, and allowed his scholar colleagues to misunderstand. He treated Lu Yunzhu's daughter as his own, calling himself her father and me her mother. If none of this mattered to him. I smiled. Lord Zhou is my benefactor. Please don't misunderstand. Hui Jie is Lord Zhou's daughter, a lively and delightful little girl. I treat her as my own daughter. I returned to Xiao Hixi exactly what he had once said to me. Looking at the incredulous expression on his face. Qin Mai, have you lost your mind? He blurted out. If you have nothing to do with Zhou Qin, why do you care for his daughter? Don't you have a family and a husband of your own? Before he could finish, he realized what he had said, and his face visibly turned ashen. The unspoken feelings he had once kept hidden were now being proclaimed loudly by his own mouth. What about you, Xiao Hixi? Why do you care for Lu Yunzhu's daughter, and even want me to give up my own child? I smiled. Crane resignation, what matters most is that the 7 of us in this family live a good life. I'm now the deputy female commissioner of the Palace Workshops Bureau, so I have status when I go out. You need to understand. Xiao He Resign's lips trembled, but in the end, he still didn't ask which 7 people I meant. Sister Hui is a little older than Sister Yu, so she'll have to bear the inconvenience of being the older sister. I apologized to Lord Zhou Qin and Zhou Hui in my heart and borrowed it for the time being, watching the resentment and jealousy in Xiao Heqi's eyes. It turns out that you only truly feel the pain of an injustice when it happens to you. He held my hand down and pleaded, "Stop talking, Xiao Mai. I know I was wrong." But I shook him off. Xiao Heisai refused to sign the divorce agreement. You want to be with that Zhou Qin? Dream on. I was puzzled. The Miss Liu he had been longing for was now safe and sound by his side, and they had spent more than half a year living in marital harmony. So why had he suddenly decided to put on an act of deep affection for me? Xiao Heisai was rendered speechless. She's a widow raising a child on her own, and life hasn't been easy for her. I do have feelings for her, and I hope to help her, but I never intended to divorce you. You're my wife. I believe you. Back then, when Xiao Heisai said he would treat Lu Yunju's child as his own, Lu Yunju still felt insecure, suffering fits throughout the night and unable to sleep peacefully. Until he promised her Mingyu would be his only child and would inherit all his property in the future. The two of them would never have any other children to compete with Mingyu for their affection. Even when he cherished her the most, Xiao Heisai never thought of abandoning me. I no longer care for this tiny bit of goodness amid the shards of glass. When you agreed to let Lu Yunju and her child stay, our fate together came to an end. In the warm yellow candlelight, Xiao Heisai carefully reached out to embrace me. It's my fault. I'll send Yunshu and Mingyu back to the countryside. Since you like the capital, we'll stay here, buy a residence, and have 2 more lively, adorable children. Do you prefer girls or boys? Time seemed to turn back, and I felt as though I had returned to 6 months ago. I had hesitantly risen onto my tiptoes to kiss the corner of his lips, only to be pushed away. In the blink of an eye, I saw Xiao Heisai's anguished, pleading eyes again. Now it was my turn. I pushed him away without hesitation. Xiao Heisai, I don't want children, and I don't want you anymore. Xiao Heisai refused to sign the divorce agreement, and someone was bound to lose patience. The first to come knocking was Lu Yunju. She was dressed all in white, worry clouding her brows and eyes. Miss Xiaomai, I thought you would never come back. I raised an eyebrow. Disrespecting a court official is punishable by 10 strokes of the cane. Miss Liu, you should call me Lord Chen. The constable accompanying him was broad-shouldered and burly. At the sound of her voice, he abruptly drew his blade, frightening Lu Yunju into retreating repeatedly. With no choice, she bowed and called out, clearly unwillingly. Lord Chen. That sounded much more pleasing. Lord Chen, since you've already left, why not leave for good? Her life was already settled and secure. She gave birth safely and went far away to the capital. Xiao Heisai could never quite let her go. As time passed, the child's biological parents became a family. That beautiful plan was thrown into disarray when I appeared. Xiao Heisai wanted to sever ties with her and even said he would send her back to her rural hometown. I was helpless. Honestly, I left without a trace. Really, I didn't take a single piece of luggage, nor did I look back even once. I couldn't have left more cleanly. You're the ones who insisted on chasing after me. Instead of blaming the people who pursued me, you blame me for not running far enough. That makes no sense. I didn't hate Lu Yunju that much. In the past, she always hid daggers beneath her softness, subtly enticing Xiao Heisai and coaxing him into giving way time and again. But without my husband going along with her, no matter how cleverly Lu Yunju maneuvered, she could never have risen above me. Every grievance has its source and every debt its debtor. Now, I only want to divorce Xiao Heisai as soon as possible and go our separate ways. I even asked her to persuade Xiao Heisai to let me go. Unexpectedly, Lu Yunju's expression changed. Are you bragging, Lord Qin? Xiao Lang is merely soft-hearted, mindful of his past relationship with you. But 2 months ago, he already registered Mingyu in the household records. According to the household register, we are husband and wife. So that's how it is. She stormed off like a victorious peacock. I accidentally bumped into Madame Chen, who had come looking for me. It was my mother. Which blind fool? Nanny Chen? I couldn't help laughing. Daughter, you've worked like a beast of burden in the Xiao household. I thought you'd risen to become Lu Yunju's mother-in-law, but it turns out you're only a nanny. I thought my mother had rushed over upon hearing the news to persuade us to reconcile. Filial piety comes first. I couldn't make her perform the formal greeting as I had Lu Yunju, so I had no choice but to let her enter first and talk. But I never expected that. Mother had come to persuade me to divorce my husband. I was astonished. Don't blame your mother either. A son-in-law is half a son, and I'm getting old, I need someone to rely on. If I don't rely on Xiao Hixi, could I rely on you? I understood, and after a moment's thought, I asked. So now you've decided to rely on me again? Mother slapped her thigh. What nonsense are you talking about? I heard that Lord Zhou of the Ministry of Rights has asked to marry you. This son-in-law is better than Xiao Hixi. Fine. It seemed she hadn't come around after all, she just started considering a new half-son. I had Mother and Lu Yunju sent back under guard and assigned 2 strong, sturdy matrons to watch over them. They did no work each day, but simply kept an eye on the family's harmony. One wants to treat Xiao Hixi as her own son, while another wants to treat Xiao Hixi as her bargain father. The 3 of them would do best tied together in one bundle, so none of them could ever leave the others. I politely declined Zhou Qin's marriage proposal. He was a very good man, and so was Sister Hui, but the world is vast, and I always felt that Deputy Female Director of the Directorate of Statecraft was not where my story ended. I'm sorry, Lord Zhou. I was forced by the circumstances at the time. My husband had not died, I did not deliberately keep it from you. Zhou Qin understood. Then do you still intend to go back and live with him? I shook my head. Impossible. I submitted the divorce by mutual consent papers to the authorities. For a woman serving as an official, if her husband refused to sign the divorce agreement, she could appeal to the authorities and have them rule on the divorce. I had never expected the official rank several grades higher than Xiao Hixi's to come in handy here. The presiding official, worried that this might delay the important affairs at the Shishan villa, immediately sent someone to bring Xiao Hixi over and compel him to sign the divorce papers. But Xiao Hixi refused. I have done nothing wrong. I refuse to divorce. If he stubbornly refused to divorce and had committed no wrongdoing, even the authorities could do nothing, but the official at the bench slammed the gavel. How dare you speak such nonsense? The Yamen runners presented the evidence, the household register from the capital. 2 months ago, to put Lu Yunju's mind at ease, Xiao Hixi took her and the child to register their household. The child's biological mother was recorded as Lu Yunju, and its biological father as Xiao Hixi. Lu Yunju wept and sobbed, refusing to be registered as a mistress or concubine. With no other choice, Xiao Hixi had to report that his first wife had suddenly fallen ill and died, and register Lu Yunju as his second wife. Lady Qin is the esteemed Deputy Female Commissioner of the Directorate of Imperial Works, yet you, a scoundrel, actually recorded her as deceased. The Xiao family sought to elevate a concubine to the status of wife and plotted to murder an official of the imperial court. Such a crime is unforgivable. This is blatant perjury. Had I not become a female official, I would now be a dead person among the common folk. Xiao Hixi's stiff neck finally slackened helplessly. He opened his mouth, then felt it was pointless. Xiao Mai, I didn't mean to hurt you. But no one was listening to him anymore. The authorities granted the 2 of us a divorce. Xiao Hisai was sentenced to 20 strokes of the cane and barred from ever holding office, completely ending his career in government for the rest of his life. After a loud flurry of blows, Big Brother Zhao scratched his head and asked me, "I accidentally used too much force just now," and he passed out. "Where should I dump him?" I burst out laughing. "Send him back to the Xiao family. Granny Chen and Miss Lu are still counting on him to support the household." Later, I heard that the Xiao family had gotten into a vicious fight, tearing at each other's hair. After humbly attending to his mistress during her confinement, my mother ended up losing her ideal son-in-law. She straightened her back, picked up a broom, and reduced the dignified Miss Lu to Madwoman Lu. Lu Yunzhu wept and begged Xiao Hisai to send my mother away, but the Xiaoling of old, now a mute Lang, was no longer willing to stand up for her. My mother stubbornly refused to leave the Xiao household, insisting that Xiao Hisai support her in her old age. Mingyu wailed and sobbed, forming a duet with Lu Yunzhu. Xiao Hisai had no choice but to drag his injured, disabled body out to find work. Only then did he realize how difficult it was to grow seedlings, how difficult woodworking was, and how even carving a small toy for a child was incredibly hard. He copied books through the night until dawn, barely managing to make ends meet. They blamed and resented each other, each accusing the other of ruining half their life. These were all stories the old nanny told me for amusement. When the Western Hills villa was completed, I was once again given a new imperial decree without pause. Though official duties were exhausting, I couldn't resist listening in for a bit, just to relieve the monotony. I have been to Jiangnan and the Great Deserts, and witnessed countless customs, traditions, and architectural styles throughout the world. I recorded them one by one again, made rubbings of them, designed them, and preserved them in the gardens of the capital. Those lifelike carvings bore my name. Chiang Mai. Many years later, my hair had turned completely gray, and Huijier's daughter kept pestering me to teach her how to carve walnut shells. "Grandma Wheat, your name is so beautiful, like wheat fields rippling in the wind, endlessly flourishing." I smiled and pointed out the parts she had carved incorrectly. "Yes, it's very beautiful."